Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. My name is Bob Bianchi. I'll be taking it from 12 to 3. We are in the Rosenbaum trial. Stormy Hendricks is on the witness stand. Let's go to court. Okay, welcome back. Timing is everything in the trial world. You never know when it's going to begin, when it's going to end. But it's a great opportunity to bring on my guest, the law and crime legal analyst, the great Rossi war room veteran, Gene Rossi. Welcome to the show, Gene.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So what's going on here? They're calling these witnesses from these schools, establishing that the child or children were not enrolled in it. Good witnesses for the prosecution because it rebuts part of her statement to the police, no?
Oh, absolutely. And yesterday we had the director of the gymnastics program that was saying that they treated the daughter with dignity, safety, respect. And now you have people that are also testifying today to rebut the allegation by one or both of the parents that somebody else did it, basically, whether it was a chicken wing or somebody else.
Yeah, and Gene, part of this case, the defense came out of the box indicating that this was an injury, the ultimate injury that killed the child, the transected pancreas, if you will, was the result of her trying to perform CPR and the Heimlich maneuver when she was choking on a chicken nugget of some sort. So that 911 call, I think, is going to be kind of important to kind of hear the way she sounded when she called them. What do you think?
Right, and I haven't heard the 911 call, Bob, but I got to tell you, and you and I have had cases on this show where the 911 call by the defendant is actually, even though they tried to be exonerate themselves, the tone of voice, how they answer the questions, and just the lack of empathy and emotion that you would normally hear, that's more devastating than an eyewitness.
Well, Gene, I have heard the 911 call because it is on some news outlets that's out there, and I think our producers are going to try to get that together for us. I think it's kind of a compelling piece of evidence, but something that I noted that I thought was interesting, you're right. We have had cases with 911 calls. The Priest murder case that I tried, my first witness out of the box was to get that 911 call out because it was a compelling piece, a riveting piece of evidence. And it's striking to me the prosecution did not do that as of yet. Now, they may do it, but it could be because she's asking the 911 operator, how do I do CPR? I'm trying to do it. She's getting instructions on how to do it. And she indicates in that call, I can tell you that I think I may have harmed the child trying to help her. That's not good testimony in my mind for the prosecution. It may explain why they haven't introduced it at least yet.
Well, it goes back, Bob. Well, how's her tone of voice? Mm-hmm. Does it sound like the questions by the defendant to the 911 person are self-serving? It all depends.
Right, Gene. Oh, absolutely, definitely. And another riveting part of this case, Gene, is the whole, youth services, they call it different things in different places, that are supposed to be watching out for these children. And we had one of those witnesses, Samantha White, on yesterday, and just slipped through the cracks. Essentially, what they're saying here is that these two people should never have even had these children to watch and foster care over in the first place. Let's take a look. Okay, so Samantha White, the foster care manager for these children, Gene, prosecution is putting the pieces together and building a sad picture of a child who is just really being tossed around all over the place, and every now and again gets to be with her grandmother.
Yes, but I gotta stress this though. Just because the family services case manager, their process, things fell through the cracks, does not mean that they did what they allegedly did to the child. Two different issues. It just shows that the services people dropped the ball. But I want to go to a witness maybe from yesterday or 2 days ago where a nurse, a neighbor, told the defendant to take the child to the hospital emergency room, and the mother didn't do anything for at least 2 hours. That was very bad testimony for the defendant.
Yeah, and there's and the doctors that were taking care of her were also noticing things. People were noticing all sorts of issues, at least now in hindsight, they're looking at that, Gene. So, I mean, you see, again, a neglected child, and the child's got a lot of injuries. But my question is, can they date those injuries and in whose care the child was in at that time?
That's where the rubber meets the road. If they can't pinpoint that the bruise, the scrape, the raccoon eyes, if they can't pinpoint exactly where it occurred, how it occurred, then you know, that inures to the benefit of the defendant.
Right, yeah. Well, it's an interesting trial, and both lawyers are going at it tooth and nail on both sides. Well-argued case. Let's listen to a little bit more of Samantha White's testimony. Samantha White was the foster care manager. Gene, what is the value of this testimony, and where's the prosecutor going with these questions?
Well, I don't think it's a home run, Bob. I just think that, you know, they went through a process, and the defendant and her husband made some statements, and they relied on them. I don't think it's a home run. I really don't.
You know, something I found interesting from the research that I was doing on this case is that the defendant, Jennifer, was in foster care, I believe, at some point in time, and that would have been an exclusion for her actually fostering these children, but they never did a background check on her maiden name. I mean, a huge seems like deficit here in terms of how these kids wound up with these two.
Well, it does show that they didn't cross their T and dot their I in evaluating the couple, but I don't know if it moves the ball greatly on proving that they took the life of the child.
Gene, real quick, what's the number one piece of evidence that you've heard so far in this case that's most compelling to you in terms of the prosecution's successful prosecution of this case?
Yeah, that one's easy. The nurse who said, "Take your daughter to the emergency room." She had the raccoon eyes. Take your daughter to the emergency room right now. And the mother waited at least 2 hours. That, to me, is a big red flag and loud gong.
Okay, well, that is a good point, Gene, and there's a lot of that in this case, a lot of medical treatment, a lot of injuries that they're going to have to work through. We're going to do a little business here at the Law and Crime Network and take a break. We'll be back on the other end. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Bob Bianchi. I'll be here to 3, and you know if it's the Law and Crime Network, it is the only network that is covering multiple trials at any given time. But the beauty of this shift is that a lot of times they're on break for a little while, so it gives me an opportunity to be with a great DOJ 30-year career history pro like Gene Rossi to break these trials down. And what our producers do is get the best clips, the best of the best, so you don't have to go through the boring stuff. We can get right to the meat of the case. And as indicated before, I asked them, please, I want to hear that 911 call because we haven't heard it in court. And they did their magic, and we have it, Gene Rossi. Let's take a listen.
What's going on there?
788 Radio Cobra. I have a toddler, a foster daughter that I just got. She was choking, and I tried to do the Heimlich on her, and she's still breathing, but it doesn't look good. And
we didn't drive. 111, we didn't drive. Code 1. How old is she? She's 2 years old?
Yes, sir.
She is breathing now?
She is breathing. I'm trying to do CPR. She keeps on going right on you. I'm hoping I didn't break a rib. I've been pushing hard. I don't really know how to do this.
Okay, I'm going to give you instructions on how to do it. Is she still choking on it now?
No.
Okay, so it is out, so we just need to do CPR then?
Yes.
Okay.
She's breathing, but it's not good. Please hurry.
Okay, well, Gene Rossi, what are your thoughts, brother?
I don't like that tape. I don't like that tape.
You don't like it if you're who?
I like it if I'm the prosecutor. That did not sound to me like a mother who is distraught that her child may be dying.
Yeah,
that's just me.
Listen, it can cut both ways, but you would have to believe that she did something to the child that was calamitous, that actually, transected her pancreas, some sort of blow in some manner, and then had the wherewithal to call the police and then to say, I was doing the Heimlich and CPR, and she indicates she was afraid she broke a rib, and she doesn't know what she's doing. That takes some pretty special lying to do that quickly from an episode where she actually caused the injury prior to the fake choking.
Absolutely, and I want to take this show to another level. If the prosecutor had not played the 911 call, Bob, as you know, the defense could have played it if they thought it was worth it, because it's a hearsay exception. It would be arguably an excited utterance. The mother is excited under stress, so it would come in anyway.
Okay, so Gene, let's go to a little law school here, okay? And by the way, today
Yes.
they're going to be giving a lecture to the ABA on media with the Dan Abrams Productions. And so anybody's out there that wants to jump online and try to find that, we're going to be doing that tonight from 6:30 to 8. But listen, Gene, here's the point. If it's hearsay, it's an out-of-court statement. But as you indicated, one of the exceptions to the hearsay rule is an excited utterance. And there is no question about the fact the judge would admit this, in my opinion, as an excited utterance. And there's other ways it can get in as well. But that was probably the easiest way for the prosecution. But here's the thing. If that prosecution does not play it, and they very well may, but if they don't, I think the defense attorney plays it and says, here's the thing they didn't want you to hear. So one way or the other, the prosecutor has to get that out.
Oh, absolutely. If the prosecution did not play that tape, the defense could get it into evidence under the excited utterance exception. The prosecution got it in because it's a statement of a defendant. It's non-hearsay. But what I like to do when I prosecuted my cases, and I know you did the same thing, I embrace my negatives. I tried to make lemonade out of lemons. But this tape, to me, is not a lemon. I think the tone of voice, the intonation, I may have broken the rib. Okay, that's pretty self-serving, and it doesn't sound like a mother who's overly distraught that her child is in harm's way.
Well, you know what, Gene? You may be right. That's why I'm going to ask anybody that's watching that are in our chat room, because we got our other jury right there in the chat room. What do you think? Does that 911 call support the prosecution, or does it assist the defense? We'll find out, Gene. I'll let you know the results when I check into the chat room. But you mentioned earlier the ER nurse that testified you felt was the most compelling witness. So what did the magic of our producers do here at the Law and Crime Network, Gene Rossi? They got the nurse's testimony. Let's take a look. All right, Gene, listen, I had Kit from the chat room as my unofficial counter on the previous question, and that question is as follows. Does the 911 call support the defense or the prosecution? And Gene, it is a resounding 100% of our second jurors said the 911 call helps the prosecution in the case.
Good.
Gene, they agree with you. Give it to Rossi. Just like in the basketball days, Gene, you got it right once again.
My heart was pounding, man. My heart was pounding.
Yeah, and I want to thank Kit from the chat room for doing that for me. She's great, and all the chatters, of course, that are in there. It's always great to watch their commentary, because I really believe, honestly, if I were trying a case, I would have one of my people, if this was being broadcast on the Law and Crime Network, literally go into that chat room and watch what these folks are saying, because it's very, very perceptive, and it can give you a great indication where most of the time, Gene, right, we're in there trying to wonder, what is the jury thinking? I wonder if it's going over well or it's not going well. What did they think of that witness? Well, there we have our second jury right there at the Law and Crime Network. Gene, back to the nurse's testimony. Why did you find it so compelling?
Well, we didn't get to the clip that I found compelling, where she said 2 hours later, this nurse saw the car still in the driveway. So the mother just waited at least 2 hours to take her to the emergency room after the nurse said, you take her there immediately.
Yeah, and I think in this case, there's also another instance where the broken leg instance, the doctor was like, get to the emergency room, immediately. And then she actually, maybe a day or two later, took her to another doctor. But what is it showing? Like, what does that necessarily mean with respect that she doesn't follow those instructions?
It goes back. We had that case from Wyoming. It was Cheyenne and that other guy and her husband. Remember that? There were 2 children, and one child they neglected. The other child had a beautiful, clean room. It shows neglect. It shows indifference. And I doubt the charge is premeditated murder. It's probably second degree or manslaughter, reckless indifference, deliberate ignorance. And that is definitely reckless indifference or reckless disregard and deliberate indifference. And those are the elements that they have to prove.
Right, and so, Gene, is that the reason why it's not 404 evidence that we love to talk about? To me, that is the most important rule in my mind in the evidence rules, which excludes other act evidence of bad character or bad instances because it goes directly to a charge or charges in the indictment?
Exactly. It's not other crimes. Other crimes would be if this defendant did the same thing to another child. That would be 404. But this is intrinsic. This is part of the whole operation, the way she treated that one child. It's not other crimes.
Gene, talk to us a little bit about what you think the defense is doing or how they're doing in this case in confronting this evidence.
Well, I saw the cross-examination by the woman attorney yesterday of the gymnastics person, and I think, and also the sister of the young girl who died. And I got to say, they're doing the best they can. This is a difficult case. I always say it's like poker. You're dealt cards. They're playing their cards as best they can. It's a tough road to hoe for the defense.
Okay, tough road to hoe for the defense, says Gene Rossi. We're going to do a little more business here at the Law and Crime Network. Don't go anywhere. If you want to miss these pithy comments from Gene Rossi, then you go. If you don't, you stay. I hope you stay.